Zahlreiche E-Mails von Kolleginnen und Kollegen, also von Menschen, die in derselben Branche unterwegs sind, haben mich in den letzten Tagen erreicht, wo Leute gesagt haben, gerade in der jetzigen Zeit hätten wir gerne mal so ein Best Practice von internationaler Ebene. Also keine Sorge, ich werde jetzt hier nicht selber einen Schwank aus meinem Leben erzählen. Leute haben halt gefragt, gibt es denn jemand, der aus langjähriger internationaler Erfahrung berichten kann, als Trainer, Redner, Coach, nennen Sie es, wie Sie möchten. Ja, das gibt es in der Tat, und zwar Jennifer de St. George. Jennifer de St. George hat damals ihre Rednerinnenkarriere begonnen und ist rund um die Welt gereist mit ihren Vorträgen, damals mit dem Satz Running Business on Common Sense and Logic. Das war ihr Satz und der trifft es eben auch ganz genau. Und deswegen habe ich sie in meinen Podcast eingeladen und sie hat sich tatsächlich für uns hier Zeit genommen, was mich besonders freut, denn sie ist unter anderem ein Honorary Fellow des britisch-irischen Rednerverbandes und meiner Meinung nach die beste Ressource für wirklich gutes Wissen, wie man heute als Person in dieser Branche weiterhin bestehen kann. Und vor allem der große Vorteil ist bei der massiven Erfahrung, die sie hat, sie versucht uns hier nicht zu verkaufen. Jennifer de St. George wohnt selber in einer sehr schönen Gegend in Kalifornien und daher wurde das Interview logischerweise auf englischer Sprache durchgeführt. Speaking in these days might be challenging for many of you, and of course, it didn't take very long until when the crisis just started, many offers popped up which said, just book here, book there, and of course, all solutions are perfect just for right now, and for $99, you will have all of your problems solved in some sort of online event. Turns out that these offers, surprise, surprise, were not true, so it is now time for some common sense and logic, and that's exactly her tagline. Welcome, Jennifer de St. George.
Niels, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you today.
Thank you very much for taking the time. We'll get straight into the problem. So we will have professional speakers or maybe business owners who say, well, I have an opportunity to speak online somewhere. I am not very experienced with it because, let's face it, most events so far were on site. What would be your tip when it comes? Because I like your tagline, common sense and logic. How should people address audiences when they speak, especially online, at the moment in these days?
All right. If you will, or if the audience will forgive perhaps a little bit of stereotyping, if I were to make some broad comments, and like everybody else, we've all been living on Zoom in these last few weeks and months, is that I like to think that when we as speakers go online, that we are speaking to our audience as if we were on stage in a live room. If you look at my website, there is only one testimonial I put on the home page. And the testimonial says, the greatest compliment I ever get as a speaker is when an audience member comes up and says, Jenny, you're just the same on stage as you are off. And that means I don't put on a different voice. I don't go into some caricature. What they see is what they get. So when I'm looking at speakers remotely, there seem to be two kinds of speakers. There are the professionals who have been working remotely for years. I'm very impressed. For the last 15 years or so, they've been organizing their own programs, and they come across very polished. Their voice, I don't want to say it's monotone, but it's certainly very contained. And then there are those of us who come from the stage, and this is all very new to us. And some of them I see being different than they would be on stage. And so my advice would be yourself, don't change your voice, have a conversation. It's a very intimate medium, and I don't think we need to overplay it. We don't need to be talking to the back row.
That is very interesting because most speakers have heard, well, I don't want to call it advice, but especially when they went through these very standardized programs of how to speak properly, many of them get told that they need to know every word, every line must be in place. So they get told to do exactly the same. They write the speech and then they deliver it over and over again. So what do you think of this approach? You most likely will not like it.
No, in fact, I'm embarrassed that when you started to speak, I actually felt my blood pressure go up, and my body actually responded to that because there are two schools of thought. One is the keynote, everything is learned, they step forward on this word, they do this. I am so not from that school. I am for, okay, let me rephrase it. If I say to somebody, oh, how interesting, you're a speaker, what do you speak on? And they say, well, I haven't quite decided yet. I say, I suggest you keep your day job. If you have passion, you don't have to have the written script. Yes, 3 times I've spoken, Niels, to the same 500 people 4 days in a row. Once in Dallas, once in Houston, once in Honolulu. I had the same large audience 4 days in a row, different subjects every day. So you have to know your subject. You have to speak. Yes, do I have, an outline? Do I know what my trigger points are? But I could spend 15 minutes on one word, or I can spend 2 minutes, depending on the timing. So I urge those of you who are listening to let your creativity come out, because to me, what separates speakers from one another are the speakers who can solve problems and create. And taking Q&As, I can always tell a creative speaker because they embrace Q&As from the audience or from remotely, because they can problem solve, they've got common sense and logic, and people want solutions. So you know me well enough. I'm not in the camp of learning it by rote.
So when you say it should be based on common sense and logic, and many people struggle to find out the trigger aspects or the trigger points of the audience, what advice would you give to people? Because often people fear that they start to speak and then they end up being irrelevant at the end, or they only get the applause out of politeness. And then people say, yeah, thank you very much and good luck with that. So how can people properly find out? Because in the room, you can read an audience's reaction and adopt to it. Online, that often in many circumstances is simply not possible. So you're basically speaking to a TV screen, computer screen, or just a camera. How do I find out what is the right way, how to deliver it to my audience?
Okay, let me tell you a story very briefly about myself, and then we'll put it into remote. I've always felt, as a speaker who spent 4 decades live on stage, my openings were weak. I felt I did not do a good job. I did not do this typical walk out, place your feet on the stage and say, just imagine if. So I felt my openings were very weak. And one day I had an idea, and I had a large audience, and I speak in 2 markets. I teach dentists and their staff. I teach dental professionals how to run a successful dental practice. And then I coach and work with speakers. And so I'm in my dental market, and I'm aware that my problem would be that I'd start half an hour in, so to speak. So on the second I started speaking, I was so passionate about my subject, I had actually done the thing you're talking about. I had not invited the audience in. Jenny was going to deliver her program regardless. And the light bulb went out one day. And so I said to the audience, what drives you crazy about patience? Well, the dam just burst. The hands went up. They start to laugh and cry. They discovered that 500 people in the room had the same problems they had. So finally, after about 10 minutes, after I let them get it all off their chest, I said, let me give you the good news. Every single thing you have called out, I have a solution for. Plus, I'm going to give you a ton of solutions to problems you yet have not realized is a problem. And from that second on, I completely changed my approach. So now, remotely, and I was on a program the other day where people, do you talk to the speaker Niels, through chat? Do you ask them through Q&A? And then people are asking all these questions and then they don't get answered. So my suggestion on remote is to stop at a specific time and invite questions. Acknowledge them and move on.
Yeah, excellent. So now, of course, yes?
No, I was going to say, to your point, if you don't invite the audience into your remote meeting, you are literally working remotely.
Very well said. Very well said indeed. Now, of course, a couple of people wonder, when I think about stepping into the world of professional speaking, of course, many people who make a living out of just training speakers to become speakers say you can always step into this world, not much knowledge needed. You have 45 minutes on stage and you're going to make it through that in one way or the other. Other people think I need 20 years of experience minimum before I should give any speech at all. And they always wonder, when do I know that I am ready to speak as an expert without embarrassing myself? And how do I find out if I can actually make a living from professional speaking? And you probably have more experience than most people I know in the industry. You're also an honorary fellow of the Professional Speaking Association in the United Kingdom and Ireland, which is very uncommon for someone who lives, I think, 10 hours flight away. So congratulations for that. And thank you very much for investing your time there. What is your advice when people now think of self-employment, either because they always wanted to, or maybe they say, I got made redundant, it's the only option I have, maybe?
Okay. I could spend 15 minutes on this because, in my opinion, this is the most important question you have asked, and the greatest gift we could give to the listeners is to focus on this point. I'm going to sum up your answer in 2 minutes, if I may.
Yes.
I'm an ambivert. So when I'm on stage, I'm at a party, I'm outgoing, whatever. When I'm off stage, honestly, I'm very private. I don't particularly get on well with people. I'm happy to stay at home and read or play with the dog. I'm very black and white. The idea of getting on stage, when I went on stage, there was no way in my personality I would have done it. But this is what happened. And when I tell this story that I'm going to tell you, and I'll try and do it in a minute or so, when I tell this to speakers, it literally has turned some of their lives around. I attended a program in San Francisco, 250 people. We all paid $100. That tells you how long ago it was. Full day program. 2 healthcare professionals, vets, physicians, dentists, whatever. End of the day, I walked up to the owner and I said I wanted my money back. He said, why? I said, your speaker was bad and her information was wrong. Oh. He said, have you ever spoken before? And I said, no. He said, could you do any better than she did? Forgive me, but I want to give you the exact quote I gave to him. I said, I sure as hell couldn't do any worse.
Okay.
He said, give me your card. I gave him my card. He said, I will call you. I waited for 3 months. Niels, he never called me. I had already written that night when I walked out of his meeting. I sat in the hotel lobby. I already wrote the way I would have done the program. I took $10,000 out of my savings account. I hired a hotel. I designed a brochure. I put it in the mail. 125 people walked through the door paying $129. And I became a professional speaker that day, and I've never looked back.
Excellent.
And what drove me was to see people getting paid for, forgive me for saying it, for crap. I thought, if people, I worked out he made a ton of money that day. Well, I can do a much better job and give them value. And that's what drove me.
Yeah. Excellent. I saw you speak many times in different countries. I think we met in the UK, in the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany. I think we basically France. I think
Paris.
Paris. Yes, exactly. The US, of course, in multiple locations. So I can really say from every single time I saw you, I'd say it was absolutely brilliant. So to wrap this whole interview up, when people are now sitting there and say, okay, that might be a lot of work right now, but I just want to have top 3 tips for my presentation, which I have next week. What are Jenny's top 3 tips to start with right now?
Okay. Number 1 is integrity. The only thing a speaker has is their reputation. Mm-hmm. So as part of number 1, always look long-term. As my career took off, people would come and offer me money to mention their product from the stage. I've only done it once, and it's a product that I used. So we have to be so careful. Now, there are people who will hustle product, and that's okay, but it's a decision you have to make, because once the door is open, you cannot take it back. So integrity is number 1. Number 2, please, to every speaker, coach, consultant listening, learn to love to write. I love to write. I write my own copy. I write the copy on my websites. I write all my marketing material. When I look at people's one-sheets, their marketing pieces, I can always tell when another writer has written about the speaker, because the passion isn't there. It's not that personal touch. They don't get the personality. Learn to write your own material and to convey through your choice of words what makes you different. And when you start having people say, I really get your personality when I read your articles, that's what makes you stand out from everybody else. And the third thing I would say is, if you can find one bone of creativity, start to develop it. Mm-hmm. I think, don't hold me to the wall on this, but I think, I'm hesitating because I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think about 97% of speakers are repurposing a lot of other people's stuff. And maybe 3% of us are really creating from scratch. If you are a creator, develop it. And if you don't think you have any creativity, have a glass of wine, put your feet on the table, and start to be creative, because that's where your uniqueness will come out.
Excellent. That is very good advice for everyone listening. And of course, I'm going to put Jenny's contact data in the show notes of this podcast. So when some people now think, well, I'd like to get in touch with her, I have some more aspects I like to talk to, you can contact her directly. Her email address is right here in the show notes of this podcast. So to wrap this whole interview up, there's only one thing for me left to say. Jenny, thank you very much for your time.
Niels, the pleasure was all mine.